Well, welcome to another webcast of A Mirror Darkly. Started a little bit late today, not a whole lot late, but a little bit. Today's episode is on empiricism, which a lot of people may or may not, well, most people probably haven't heard of. Empiricism comes from philosophy, and...
Hold on. Oh, my down button won't go. There we go. My media was up.
Oh, okay.
I caught it, but the down button didn't want to go down.
Empiricism is a theory that states that knowledge is something that we receive only or primarily from sensory experience. It's one of several views of epistemology, another big word that most people probably are not familiar with. Epistemology deals with our theories of knowledge, that is, how do we know what we know? And empiricism is one of those theories of knowledge. And essentially what it's saying is that what we know comes to us through external sources. That is, we do not have innate knowledge, or at least what innate stuff we have is relatively limited. Noam Chomsky argues that our ability to use language is something that is hardwired into us. That is, that we are naturally predisposed to be able to use language. There's some question as to whether or not Chomsky is right on this, but it's not a completely unreasonable notion. That is, there are certain things that for us are instinctual. That is, breathing, our heart beating, the sucking instinct for babies. And so language would seem like something that we are predisposed to do, but what language you end up using is dependent upon what comes to you from the outside. Now, some Christians are not entirely happy with empiricism because they find it somehow incompatible with some aspects of Christianity. I'm not entirely sure why, because our understanding of who and what God is, and our relationship with God, is something that comes to us from outside of us in some way. You're very quiet.
Listening.
Oh.
I haven't had an important thought yet.
Oh. Nothing has come to you.
No, I'm just happy that the banner is over my fat. Because normally it's only half in there because we're only two of us. I'm farther over today.
Yes, we have no help this time.
Yes.
Vanessa was home visiting us. And
part of the reason we're late.
Part of the reason we're late. And we invited her to come, but she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to be on camera. She doesn't really like cameras. So she says, although she takes more selfies than any person I've ever seen. So I don't know.
She just likes to be on her own camera on her own terms.
Apparently. Now, I think part of the problem with some Christians when they think in terms of empiricism and the fact that what we know is something that we get from sensory data of whatever sort is that they think that that's contrary to spiritual things. Mm-hmm. But God, even as Christians, we argue he lives inside of us, he's still apart from us. That is, he's not the same as us. He communicates to us. In Joel, it's a quotation of Joel chapter 2. Peter, on the day of Pentecost, quotes from the prophet Joel. And in Acts chapter 2, verses 14 through 21, he says, then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and addressed the crowd. Fellow Jews and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. These people are not drunk as you suppose. It's only 9 a.m. No, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel, as I told you, chapter 2. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord, and everyone who calls the name Lord will be saved. What we know is almost, I would argue, entirely from what we gather from the outside. That is, you do not have innate knowledge. In fact, false prophets are criticized in the Old Testament in the word, well, is Ezekiel, or I believe it was Ezekiel. He was supposed to tell them, you're just making this stuff up out of your own head. You have not heard from God. And the prophets describe prophecy as something that they are hearing the words of the Lord and then relaying them. That is, they're getting it from outside themselves. Mm-hmm. It's not something that just springs out unbidden inside of them. One of the things that's interesting to think about is our imaginations. Even our imaginations are dependent upon what comes from the outside. Mm-hmm. Think in terms of every alien that you have ever seen portrayed on screen or in writing. The aliens are always derived somehow from things that we know. Mm-hmm. That is, any mythical animal, anything, it's a combination of things that we know. Mm-hmm. That is, you can't conceive of something apart from gathering the information from what you have learned from external sources.
I was watching Dr. Phil this week, I was watching it today, and there was a guy on there who believed that he had been possessed by demons, and that his girlfriend currently was, and that the exorcism that they had done didn't work. So anyway, my point is that he, being an artist, he decided to do sketches of what each of them was seeing, what these demons looked like that they were seeing inside themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because the demons all looked like something that is like in a comic book, or the little red devil kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Everything was like red, and like she said that when she was having a demonic episode, like the room was flooded in red, and it's like, and so it's all stuff that they've gotten from other things, like seeing movies, or mm-hmm. watching The Exorcist or whatever.
Right.
And so I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching this, I'm going, if this were legit, they wouldn't be drawing stereotypical yeah, exactly, stereotypical demons.
Right.
Yeah, they would be,
demons as we portray them in our culture.
Right.
Different cultures have different mm-hmm. ways of doing it, and even colors vary from one culture to the other. Mm-hmm. I've talked about this. There's again, getting into technical terms, there's something called semiotics. Semiotics is the study of signs, symbols. No, that's semaphore.
Okay.
Semiotics is the study of signs, symbols. And it's important in linguistics and in philosophy in general. For instance, to give you an idea of how this would work, the English word water mm-hmm. will neither make you wet nor quench your thirst.
Right.
Because the English word water is a symbol mm-hmm. of the actual substance.
Right.
The color red in Western culture, it varies how we perceive it. Mm-hmm. That is, it can be perceived as being an attractive thing going back to our evolutionary forebearers, because flashing red bums is a sign of fertility. And so women or men wearing red is viewed in that sexual way.
Interesting.
And so in those senses, it's a positive thing and attractive. But if you see an octagonal sign that's red, you stop.
Right.
It makes you stop. Or if you see a flashing red light,
right.
It's, again, a negative sort of thing.
Yeah, red light behind you.
Red light behind you. It's a
negative
negative
thing. Don't stop
thing.
for the red octagon, you're going to see the red light behind you.
Yes. Red is the sign of danger in those mm-hmm. settings. And then, of course, that concept, for whatever reason, has been associated, at least in Western thinking, with the devil. Sometimes, or black is associated with evil, probably connecting to our general fear of being in the dark. Because being in the dark, when you're a hunter-gatherer on the savannah somewhere, you don't know what's creeping up on you, and it could be a bad guy, it could be a bad animal, it's going to eat you, whatever. Darkness was dangerous, and so we have kind of a negative feeling towards darkness, and hence the color black. But these do not literally signify something bad. But we have a tendency to perceive it that way. And again, it's based on what has come to us from the outside. It's not something innate. It's not an innate thing. It's something that is learned. And that's kind of what empiricism is all about. It's arguing that everything that makes us who we are is something that we have learned from or experienced, or it's come to us from the outside. And as Christians, this is how we spread the gospel. It's through telling people, that is, informing them, giving them the information. They are gathering it from empirical evidence. Empirical evidence, empiricism, insists on, being able to demonstrate that something is so. We live in a period of time in history, and the world swings back and forth between what's called romanticism and empiricism. Romantic ages are where everything is focused on how you feel, and emotion takes precedence, and evidence is not so important. And so you just believe something because it gives you warm fuzzy, not necessarily because there's any evidence to support it. Oftentimes there's evidence against it, but then you're just a bad person and you're just not with it because you're rejecting this thing. But empiricism is, and then you got some weird people today that will talk about evidence-based and empirical stuff as being somehow part of the patriarchy and oppressive and all that sort of thing, which is bunk. And we do not live, despite what people will say, as anything other than fundamentally empirically based creatures. That is, we want evidence. As proof of that, even the most solipsism is the idea that only you exist and everything else is just an act, kind of like you're in the Truman Show.
Is that like the Matrix kind of an idea?
No, the Matrix is something else.
Okay. That none of us exist.
No, but the Matrix is that we are a brain in a vat, and that we can't rely, that as our senses are not reliable. That is, it could be, and there's no way of demonstrating this one way or the other, that you're just a brain in a vat and some mad scientist is feeding all this stuff in and you're interpreting it as being reality as we know it. Because none of us have direct apperception of reality. That is, everything is mediated to us through our senses. That is, your eye, the light hits it, you've got chemical things that go on, an electrical impulse is sent to your brain interprets that information as what you're seeing. Same thing when you hear, when you touch, when you feel, when you taste. All these things are electrical impulses being fed to your brain that your brain interprets as reality. And so you could just be a brain and some mad scientist is giving you all these false signals. Virtual reality is a step away from that direct kind of interference with what you're seeing. But still, you've got this thing on your head and you are imagining that you're seeing these things. Your brain interprets it just as if it's real, but you know on some level that it's not, because you put these glasses on, you know what you're doing. And then you trip over the stairs.
That reminds me, I have to schedule our virtual reality field trips for the 31st, but that's neither here nor there. It just happened to pop into my head.
Well, that would
I'm going to make myself a quick note so I don't forget, because I will forget. Of course, then I got to remember to check my notes.
Yeah. But anyway, what I was saying, that even if you want to reject the idea of empirical evidence, chances are you're going to look both ways before you cross the street. Because you assume on a very basic level that these things are real, and if you step into the street without looking both ways, you may be crushed by a truck.
Yes, because that is real.
Because the trucks are real. Or if you consume bleach, that probably will not be a healthy choice on your part. That is, we live our lives as if we believe in empiricism. And that in itself, I think, is a good argument for its reality and the importance of it. But yeah, everything that we are, everything that we know, we have learned from exposure in one way or the other. And we assume as Christians that God actually exists and that God is interested in communicating with us. And so any of that communication, again, is coming from God to us. It's externally perceived. Whether it's through a dream that he would give us, whether it's him talking to us, if he should, Jesus when he was here on earth, talking to his disciples, doing all the things he did. Again, it was all empirically obtained. It wasn't something that suddenly just sprang naturally out of your being. I don't know that there's any information that we get that just doesn't come from an external source. Even if you want to say that you have insight or that an angel talked to you or whatever, again, it's coming from outside you. It's not you.
And new ideas and stuff are usually a synthesis of other ideas.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, we're very much dependent upon what we get from the external universe around us. Even spiritual things are coming to us from the external, not apart from that. And our interpretation then of that is due to what we've already gained knowledge of. It's like what I've said about in giving a lecture, or people listening to what we're doing here today, 3 possibilities can happen when you talk to somebody. You can have it go in one ear and out the other, and it makes no imprint whatsoever. And that's mostly what happens most of the time. Like, that's why you complain that I'm not listening to you. You give me information, do this, do that, and nothing happens because I didn't hear it.
Tell me when you're ready to go to the webcast. I'll be back working on the computer because I'm trying desperately to finish my lesson plans. And then you come in and you're like, "Are we going?" I'm like, "I told you," because you were talking to Vanessa.
Right, so
and
I didn't
it's
hear
like,
it.
yeah,
Just,
it's like.
And that's what happens with most
36 years of training down the tubes. 36 years plus.
I'm just a difficult subject.
You're always thinking bigger thoughts.
The second possibility of what happens when somebody is talking is that the information goes in, doesn't go out the other ear, it stays inside your head. But you simply take it and look at it and say, oh, it goes in this box. Bloop. And has no real impact on your life. The third possibility, and this is the rarest of the things that will happen, is it goes into your ear, you look at it and you realize, wow, this doesn't fit anywhere. I'm going to have to change how I look at things. And if you're a teacher, politician, anybody, this is what you want to have happen as much as possible. And it's the rarest of all things to happen. And it's because we already know it's attributed to Mark Twain. He actually didn't say it. It's somebody else. Lots of things get attributed to Mark Twain because people like Mark Twain, and it adds a cachet of wonderfulness about any topic. Said it's not the things that we know that's a problem. It's the stuff that we think we know and don't know, or think we know that we don't know. There's a lot of information stuck in our heads that is nonsense that we bank unfortunately.
Well, and the thing now, it's so easy to check on that kind of stuff.
Except
you
that
know?
people are very bad at checking.
I know, like these missing children things. There's one that keeps popping up. The little boy and his mom were found dead like over a month ago, and somebody just posted it. And all you have to do is click on the link to see if they've been found yet or not. And what I do is, if it doesn't say in the article that the person sent me, then I put in the person's first and last name, where they're, like, whatever the location is, and then I put missing. And then I look through at least two, and if at least two of them don't say they've been found, then I'll share it. You know, because you get these Amber Alerts and stuff from, like, news places.
Yes.
But it's always, like, super local, like Fox 13 in Chicago or something.
Yes.
That's the most prolific one. A lot of children are missing from Chicago, apparently. But, because that's the news that always carries it. But, anyway, and it's like, and some of them, you know, were found like years ago, found safe like 5 years ago. And it's like, really? All you had to do was click on the link. It says, found safe at,
That's so much
date.
work.
I know, clicking is so hard.
No.
But the thing is, here's the danger in it. And people are like, well, you know, it doesn't hurt. Well, it does. If you're the loved one of that child who is found dead, and it keeps popping up on your screen, like your friends keep passing, or, well, not your friends in the sense people that know you personally, but well-meaning people in your group of what you've designated as friends on Facebook, they're passing it around, and you're like, you know what, that's my loved one. I really don't want you guys rehashing this. You know, so it really is cruel to not check.
Yes.
And so that's why it bothers me. Otherwise, I would just ignore them. I don't mind clicking on it and looking, but what bothers me about it is, what impact is this having on the family of this person? Because even when, speaking from experience, our daughter went missing for a few days, and suddenly the world is a really giant place. Like I am here, and my child is at some point that I don't know where it is, somewhere on this planet. And suddenly it's a really big place to look. And so when you're like, I've been listening to, I'm big into podcasts now, and so I'm listening to Dr. Phil's crime analysis of murder podcast, and I'm going through the Kyron Horman thing, the little guy who his stepmother took him to the science fair before school. Never heard of a science fair before school, but whatever. It's probably a late starting school. And then she watched him as he walked off to class and waved to her, but he never got to class because he was never marked in attendance, and or he was never marked present. And the teacher didn't see him all day, but because there had been something about him possibly having an appointment or something, it didn't alert anybody like, hey, he's supposed to be at school. Although, to be honest, if a kid is absent, we usually don't go, oh my gosh, Joey's absent, I wonder what's wrong. You know, it's after a couple of days, if they're not showing up, I'll send a note to the, like, because I communicate through an app, and I'll be like, oh, I hope Joey's okay, you know, and then that's when you get the, well, he's sick, or, oh, we forgot school started. I've gotten that. And, oh, he told us there was no school on Monday. That's always a funny one, too, because then you're not reading my
Being
parent
kidnapped
letters.
and murdered is not the normal thing that happens to little children?
No, not usually.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten
which is
that
why it
one yet,
becomes
knock
news.
on wood.
Yes.
So, anyway, but the thing is that the world becomes a really giant place when your loved one is missing. And to have those feelings dredged back up, even if they've been found safe. Like our daughter, we got her back after a couple of days. And to have that dredged up, those feelings, that lost feeling, is really not cool. So especially if they were gone for a long period of time, like that girl, what was her name? The Mormon girl that was kidnapped from her bed. And she was gone for a while. She's back. She's, you know, gone through therapy and stuff, and she's married and has kids, and she does talks now about her experience and that. But even to have that dredged up for her parents, I can imagine would not be a happy thing. I mean, everybody knows she's been found, so nobody's going to pass that one around.
Probably.
But you just think about what that would be like if your loved one had been missing for an extended period of time and then stuff keeps coming up. So I would really caution people that before you send it out, that you check it.
Yes.
So enough said on that.
Yeah. But no, people, generally speaking, are not good at doing research.
Right. And people are well-meaning. They're not trying to post
they're
things
not
that
trying
are
to be mean.
stupid on purpose. Well, there are some that do, but we call them politicians.
Yes.
But for the average ones of us who are not elected to an office and trying to get reelected, people are well-meaning.
Yeah, they
And
post things that
And I've
because they think it's
accidentally-
interesting, or
right.
because they think, oh, this, or because it makes them angry or makes them happy or whatever, and they don't bother to check.
And I have accidentally reposted things that I'm like, oops, if I had taken a second, I would have seen that was stupid. So I'm a lot more careful now in my old age. But
Yes. Well, as you get burned once or twice, then you learn, okay, I need to be careful. Or at least you would think you would learn.
right. Well, and the thing is that when you're a person who says to people, please check your sources before putting this out, and then you don't, that's kind of hypocritical.
Yes.
So I try to be really careful because I want to teach other people to be just as cautious.
Right.
So,
Now, empiricism is part of, or one of the underlying assumptions of the scientific method. And so this is something that we keep harping on. Of course, it kind of makes sense. Unbridled inquiry. Inquiry is part of this whole process. And the real big rule of thumb in inquiry in general is skepticism. That is, always treat the information that comes to you as if it's some sketchy used car salesman who's trying to run for public office.
or just your average politician.
And you're going to want to double check to make sure, and particularly if it's a sketchy used car salesman that you've known since high school.
Yeah. And he used to
it-
cheat on tests.
Yeah. But no, the problem is, and this is natural for us as human beings, is that we get more excited by things that confirm what we believe. That is, if you run an experiment and it turns out the way you were hoping, you'll tend to be happier than if it turns out against what you thought. But yet both experiments are very successful. They're telling you something. And a negative result is just as useful to you as a positive result, but it doesn't feel that way. Because as human beings, we're not as rational or as empirically based in our thinking as we would like to imagine we are.
Here's a good example of checking your sources and stuff. So this morning, so my friend from Weight Watchers, she kept posting things from the local news, and it was legitimate. It was our local news, KTLA and Channel 7. It was ABC and KTLA. So, and it was about Edison turning off power to thousands of people in the Antelope Valley to prevent the brush fires from happening in surrounding areas. And so we're talking about it, and one person that was sitting there with us, he was like, are we even on that power grid? And, is that where we're getting our power from and stuff, that they would need to do that? And so she posted it like at least twice that I'm aware of, and kept talking about it. So while we're sitting there at Weight Watchers, I decided, I'm going to look, and I made this comment. I said, well, it could be fake news. Even though it's on actual news, it could be fake news. And people laughed, and they're like, oh, really, fake news? I go, yeah. I don't even trust the normal news anymore. Like, I really only watch local news because I just kind of want to know, like, what the weather's going to be like, what's going to happen in the LA area. If we all have to worry about getting typhoid, or now it's like leprosy or something, I don't know.
And just stay out of those sections of LA. And you'll
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I actually did check on casual contact for typhus because if I go through Union Station, I almost say Grand Central, Union Station, if there's somebody there with typhoid, do I have to worry about it like with casual contact? And you don't.
Okay.
So, but anyway, and you can get vaccinated for it. It's treated really easily. So anyway, it's weird that we have to talk about that. Anyway, so I decided I just typed into Google, what did I put? I just put a question. My kids tell me I Google search like an old person because I just typed in the question, power outages in the Antelope Valley, something like that. Will there be power outages in the Antelope Valley? Anyway, it took me to Edison's website, and there was the actual legit thing. They said there was a possibility that some areas of the Antelope Valley, like Juniper Hills, which is like, I don't know, way out somewhere, like it's like the edges of the Antelope Valley, like because of the electricity coming over the San Gabriel Mountains, because it was like Lake LA and those areas kind of near the San Gabriels. It didn't include all of Lancaster. It didn't include any of Lancaster, like a small piece of Palmdale from what I could tell. Anyway, might experience some power outages if Edison feels that they need to shut it off to prevent brush fires. So it's not like we're going to lose power for months at a time, and things like that. They're just letting us know that that could possibly happen. So people get all up in arms about something, and if you just check, there's nothing to worry about. Because I don't live in Juniper Hills. Sorry if you live in Juniper Hills, you might lose some power, but look at the Southern California Edison website. Yeah. Don't listen to the
So this illustrates one of the important aspects of doing research, which is to find primary source materials. And see, this is the problem with news organizations in general, is that they are not primary source materials. They're secondary. That is, if the reporter is a good reporter, he or she has done research, gotten the information, then he or she is sharing that with you. But that's still secondary research. Right. That is, you're not getting the original source material. And so going to Edison, that's going to the source. Right. Because they're the ones that actually would be turning off the power if they need to turn off the power for our area. Since Southern California Edison is the primary power company for our particular part of the world. I've mentioned before the Gell-Mann effect, and this is an important thing to always keep in mind. I was talking to my mother last week or this week? Last week, I think. She used to work for a newspaper back many years ago, a small town newspaper. And she said that, every time there was a story where she knew what was going on, as she already knew about the story, it was wrong. They always made mistakes in it. And I was noticing this just this past week on CNN. They did a thing on SpaceX and screwed up all sorts of very basic facts, like regarding escape velocity, orbital speeds, all these sorts of things. But it illustrates that the reporter in that particular thing had no clue what she was talking about, which is often the case. And so skepticism with any secondary or tertiary source of information is justified. Try to find primary sources. If you can't do that, then get several. It's like if you went to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you've got this disease, you might want to get a second opinion. And so the same thing should be done with your news. When you get the second opinion or third opinion, make sure you're getting an opinion from some source that is of a different point of view than the first source that you checked. That is, if you primarily are looking at getting information from MSNBC, then go and check Fox or CNN. That is, don't just stay in one particular thing. Because you're not going to get an unbiased accounting that way. But if you possibly can, go back to the primary sources, which is more time consuming. It's not necessarily interesting.
But it's so easy now. Like when you had to go back to primary sources, you had to drive to UCLA and go to one of 6 libraries. Yeah. And they're like tall buildings with many, many, many books. Yes. And and it was hard. Now, all you have to do is, do a Google search like an old person. Just ask it the question.
Yeah, well, Google is designed to be able to handle normal English questions.
Right. But
it's
back in the
always
day, you
perfect,
had to use symbols in your search and stuff like that
Yes.
to get it to come out right. But now the algorithms that they use for
Are
the
much
searches,
improved.
so it's ready for old people to say, what will the temperature be today,
And it
or
will
whatever.
tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, if you didn't know, that box where you type the URL on Google is called an omnibox, omni meaning all, which means if you need a timer, you just put in timer 3 minutes, bam, your computer turns into a giant timer. This is a good one. So on Facebook, when they give you those math problems where you have to know PEDMAS, that, parentheses, exponents, all that.
Yeah.
If you just type the equation in exactly the way it's written on the Facebook meme, it will give you the right answer. You don't have to do the math.
Yes.
So, and then everybody will be like, no, that's not how you do it. And it's like, yeah, it's how I do it because Google is how I roll. So just a little info for you there that URL box is really called an omnibox, and you can legit put anything in there and it'll come up.
Yeah, basic searches, you can do it up there. You don't have to go to Google and then their little thing. And
Yeah,
type
just
it.
write
Just
truck
in
image,
the-
and you'll get a picture of a truck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very easy.
Yes,
It's
and
much
so
easier than
not
back in the day
searching
having
is
to go
stupid.
Yeah. But, if you hear reports about a speech or reports about, this person said that or this person wrote that, go and find the actual quotations on the internet. And don't just rely on, this website that has a bunch of quotes on it. That doesn't prove that the quote is accurate. You want to try to know whether or not a quote is accurate. You need to be able to determine the date, place, source that the thing actually came from, and then you might want to actually go to that source and look
And see if it's
and
actually
see if it's
there.
actually there, and also see if it's being quoted accurately. What is the context? Because things will be taken out of context more times than you can imagine. I mean, being a theologian, I see biblical passages taken out of context on a regular basis by many very well-meaning people, and they make these pretty little memes, and they'll have the verse there, and it's like, well, okay, but that's not what it's actually saying.
Yeah. Well, like on our retreat, we didn't go on retreat this year, but last year when we went, there were a lot of quotes from Job in that study. And it was a study that someone had requested, so I was willing to do it. But I was very skeptical of it because since I know a lot of the things that you could possibly quote in Job are wrong, because it's the friends, his quote-unquote friends, kind of not unlike Facebook friends, I would say,
Yes.
that they weren't true friends. But at the end, when God says, all these guys, you guys are all wrong, so everything they say is patently false, and so people quote it like as if it's truth, but God already said they're wrong because you didn't read the end of the book, and so there were things in there, and that's why I went through it really carefully.
Yeah, if it's something Job says, then
beforehand.
it's because at the end of the
Right.
book, God says what Job said was right, what you guys said is wrong. So that tells you, okay, if it's a quote from one of his friends, you can kind of discount it. If it's something Job said, then you can take it seriously.
Right.
And the context is always critically important. Anything that you ever see quoted from the book of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, chances are it's being taken out of context because the book of Ecclesiastes is a philosophical treatise. And the author of Ecclesiastes is making an argument. And so you've got to follow his argument all the way through. Picking out a piece of it and saying, look at this.
Everything is meaningless.
Yeah,
Not a good quote
not
to
a good
live
quote.
by.
You have to see what he's talking about as a whole. It's part of the reason why I read through the Bible completely every year, is because that way I am constantly reacquainted with the big context. Going back to original sources, part of my motivation in learning Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, all these different languages, is because I didn't want to be dependent upon secondary sources for these sorts of things. I wanted to get to the primary sources and see them for myself and understand them for myself. That was my primary motivation doing that. And that was something that entered my head fairly early on in my life, oddly enough, that I needed to learn those languages. So I ended up taking those as an undergraduate even. But yeah, primary sources, I cannot emphasize that enough. And then just being skeptical of anything that confirms what you believe. That is, be as skeptical of the things that confirm what you believe as you would be of things that are attacking your position. It's very hard to do as a human being because we are not wired that way. We enjoy things that match what we believe about a person. That's why gossip is so tasty. Because did you hear what so-and-so did? Well, tell me, because you don't like this person, so you want to find more dirt on them. And the dirt that you get just reconfirms for you that, yes, they are despicable people, and so we should...
And if anybody tells you something good about that person, you'll disregard it because of confirmation bias.
Yes.
And that's what America is experiencing a lot of on either side.
On all sides.
Yes.
That seems to be all we care about, is what confirms our narrative of the way things should be. And nobody bothers to actually check to see what's actually going on. With any news story that's reported, wait at least probably 48 hours, and even then...
Well, longer than that, because the 24-hour news cycle, things get repeated for a lot longer, it seems like. And, yeah. But,
yeah, you need to... Yeah, it's highly annoying. The thing to keep in mind, too, about it is it's not new. That is, this is the way the news has always been given to us.
We just get it by the shovelful now instead of by the spoonful.
Right.
Used to get, people would read Ward Cleaver would read the morning paper, and watch the NBC nightly news, and then June Cleaver, before she'd vacuum in her pearls and high heels, she'd watch the Today Show, get her news that way, and you just got it in little
bits and pieces, and you didn't have a lot of different options then either.
And
so part of that too is because you didn't have a lot of options, you didn't necessarily know that it wasn't accurate all the time.
Right.
And that's the key thing to keep in mind, is that the news is oftentimes not accurate. Like I said, Gell-Mann effect. If you know the subject, you'll discover that even high-class news organizations will oftentimes mess things up. Sometimes there are important details, and they're not always good about making corrections or even caring about making corrections. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have written to news organizations that publish the Sumerian text upside down, and they don't care. Probably because 99.999% of the population doesn't care and couldn't tell anyway. But still, it is annoying.
Yeah.
There's only 200 people on the planet that know Sumerian well enough to know if it's upside down or not.
I'm not one of them.
No.
He is.
Yeah. Well, when I took Sumerian at UCLA, they said that our class was probably the largest Sumerian class in history since the time of ancient Sumer. There were 11 of us. But because most Sumerian, if you take Sumerian, UCLA, major university, one of the best universities for ancient Near Eastern languages.
And football.
Yeah, very good football team. Well, they're doing pretty well this year. Anyway, not always, but this year they seem to be okay. What was I saying? Got distracted by football. Sumerian. They had not had a Sumerian class there for a decade or two. And we just happened to have somebody that showed up at the school, one of the graduate students that had studied previously under Jakobson, who was a major Sumerologist back east. And so he knew Sumerian.
Oh.
And so they put them into the classroom, and we had Sumerian.
And you filled up those
And we
seats,
filled
all
up
11 of them.
All 11 of us. We took the class because when you get to take Sumerian, it's hard to find a class in Sumerian. So when
Now-
it was offered, we took it, and I got, 3 years worth of Sumerian out of it.
What was the population, do they estimate, of Sumer back in the day?
Oh, it was the majors. Okay, today in the major language in the Near East, or what we now call the Middle East, is Arabic. Before Arabic became
Oh,
dominant.
this is right up Angie's tree. She speaks Arabic.
Okay, before Arabic became dominant after the Muslim conquest, beginning in the 600s AD, the dominant language in the Middle East was Aramaic. Now, both Arabic and Aramaic are Semitic languages, and they're related to each other, but they are different. Before Aramaic became the dominant language in the ancient Near East, the dominant language was Akkadian, what we know as Babylonian or Assyrian. Before Babylonian and Assyrian were dominant, a non-Semitic language was dominant, and that language was Sumerian.
Okay.
So Sumerian had the position in the Middle East that Arabic has now. It was
Okay.
that widespread, that widely used, dominant language over a very wide area of the world, region of the world.
Right.
So very important language. We have tens of thousands of tablets written in this language. Now, oddly enough, all those tablets date to a period of time when Sumerian was already starting to die out and being replaced by Akkadian. So, but Sumerian is considered to be the first written language. So it goes back and forth between Egyptian and Sumerian. Right now, Sumerian is still considered the oldest of the written languages. Who actually is the oldest, we don't know, but of the ones that we know, those are the two that goes
Interesting.
back and forth between. So Sumerian's really an important language, but
So their graduating classes would have been larger
they
than
would
11.
have been larger than 11.
Got it. Okay, that was the point I was making.
Oh, okay. You didn't want a whole history of.
Not really, but it
The
was
Middle
interesting.
Eastern
And
language.
my friend Angie speaks Arabic, so
there you
she
go.
actually translates at our school, and I love
well, that's
listening to
nice.
her speak it because it's a very pretty language.
Yes, it is. The Semitic languages in general are very pretty, and that the reason for that is because of the way they're put together. Each syllable, there's only two ways a syllable can be formed in a Semitic language: consonant, vowel, consonant, or consonant, vowel. And so you have a lot
That would make
of,
phonics so much easier.
and so you have a lot of vowels in it.
Oh,
And so that's what makes it sound so pretty, is all the vowels, that it's very vowel heavy.
okay.
Which is interesting too, because Semitic languages, generally speaking, like, well, with Arabic or with Hebrew or with Aramaic, they didn't write vowels down. They only wrote the consonants. So, anyway.
So consonant-heavy languages would not sound as nice.
No, German sounds the way it does because there's so many consonants. In English, to a non-native speaker, English is going to sound like German does to us. That is going to be kind of a harsh, guttural, nasty-sounding thing. Just the
Sorry,
way it is.
Stephanie, our German friend.
Yes, but no, I mean, the Indo-European languages are not pretty. Also, from a structural standpoint, they're not pretty.
Although French and Spanish are.
Yeah, they have more vowels.
Yeah, interesting.
But the Indo-European languages in general are more difficult to learn also. The Semitic languages are pretty easy to learn,
But you have to learn another alphabet,
You
and
have to
that's
learn
where
another
it's
alphabet,
tricky.
and that's where it becomes
Yeah,
tricky for
and
people.
I think that
But structure,
Asian languages are difficult for Americans to listen to because they're tonal.
yeah, the tonal quality is what makes it hard. That is, of the languages, the most difficult language to learn are the Chinese languages. Second most difficult language to learn is English.
Because
Yeah.
we're such a mishmash. of
Yeah,
other
English,
languages.
because of the history of England and being invaded by everybody and their neighbor, English is just this very weird mishmash, and we do some weird things in the language as a consequence of that. So, for instance, most Indo-European languages, the adjective comes after the noun that it modifies. In English, it's the other way around, which is weird for the kind of language that English is. It shouldn't do that, but it does, and so that's a weird thing.
See, I have to teach that in school because Spanish kids, like they say, like truck red, they don't say red truck.
Right.
And so I tell them the adjective will follow, unless you say the truck is red, it's still an adjective, but it follows the verb.
Right.
So English is hard.
English is very hard. We also have an incredibly large vocabulary. And again, it's because we've been invaded by everybody. And in the language, the people that speak it have become very used to just grabbing anything and adding it to the language. And so
now
we're
we
very
take
happy to add more
half
things.
of two words and stick them together and make a new
Well,
word. Now that's
other languages do that too.
do they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's not unique. But so far as the vocabulary of English, it is bizarre. It's just, we have I forget what the numbers are. I don't remember what the numbers are, but the language in second place vocabulary wise, I mean, it's a huge gap. English is just weirdly large in the number of words it has in it versus the next language. The advantage of that, though, is that we can be very precise, more precise than any other language, because we have words for the most minuscule little things. Somehow we've gotten from empiricism to linguistics.
Yes, we have.
Don't know how that happened.
It was a very large bunny that
Yes, it
kidnapped
was.
our brains.
Yes, and ran off with us.
Yes. We have 5 more minutes.
Yes.
Of course, what time did we start?
We started 5 minutes late.
Okay, so we kind of have 10 minutes. but-
Yes, we could keep going for 10 minutes.
Yes. People have been coming and going during the webcast.
Yeah, I'm sure they get bored by listening to whatever we're talking about, particularly as we get into more technical aspects
Yeah.
of things. Are we getting any questions from anybody?
Nope.
No?
Angie said hi, I said hi back.
Oh,
And I
okay.
mentioned her because she showed up. It's nice, I don't have to lean over now. I did lean over because I forgot, but I can just switch to live video comments. And it'll leave me a dot there if I'm on this one.
Yeah.
And if somebody says something, it puts a dot there, so I click on it. I can't believe I
Okay.
didn't notice that before.
Yeah,
But
we learn little things.
yeah, so it's nice. I can lean back. I'm not going to fall over backwards because I'm up against a wall.
Yep.
And
I bet you I could lean back and fall down.
you probably could because you're close to the door.
Well, just
And the
because
door
I'm
doesn't
more
close.
clumsy than you are, too.
Yes, you're clumsier and you're closer to an opening.
Yes. Yeah,
So-
that way would not be good.
Yeah.
Of course, I've actually hurt myself getting out of the booth.
Yeah, because you're not careful.
I'm clumsy.
I'm very careful, cautious.
Yeah. I'm
You
clumsy
are
enough
not.
that I don't always remember exactly how I've hurt myself. Like I've got this scab here from a burn. I can't really clearly remember how I did that.
Huh.
Something to do with the oven, I think.
Probably.
But
I know how I got this burn. I was doing Thanksgiving dinner, and my mom distracted me, and I hit my thumb on the oven rack. I remember almost all my boo-boos. I rarely have a boo-boo that I don't go, where'd that come from?
yeah, Vanessa and I both will have boo-boos, and we're not entirely sure where they come from.
Yeah.
Vanessa thinks that somehow she inherited that from me.
Yes, environmental inheritance. We'll have
Yes.
to come up with a new thing.
Don't know. Nature versus nurture. So, empiricism. Who you are is what you have learned from what you have been exposed to. So in that respect, nurture is important, at least from the language that you're speaking is because that's what you learned from what you've been exposed to.
Well, there was somebody that said, and I don't know who it was, that babies come equipped for all the languages. It's
Yes,
what
they
gets
do.
reinforced.
Yep.
So when they say something, it sounds like dad, then everybody goes, oh, you said dad. And then
It positively reinforces that,
yeah.
and so
And then
they
they
keep making the
continue to do
noise.
it.
And the sounds that they make that don't match the language that they happen to be in fade away because there is no need for it and it was never encouraged. And so a Semitic-speaking person growing up in a Semitic-speaking world will be able to say without any problem. But for someone who did not grow up in a Semitic-speaking world, making the het sound is not easy.
Like rolling your R's.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not something English speakers do, and so it's something that you really have to learn. I know when I was in Israel, they told me that the way we make the L sound is slightly different than the way they do, and that's one of the ways they can tell whether you're not a native speaker of Hebrew, is because you just don't make the L quite right.
My grandpa, whenever he would sing hymns in church, and in R, like the song Redeemed, he would roll the R's to go, redeemed, redeemed, and sing like that. But then when he prayed, he used the these and the thous,
there's
too,
different ways.
That's God's native language.
Yeah, well, there's different ways of rolling the R even. That is, again, thinking in terms of Hebrew, the way they make the R sound is kind of a rolled R, but it's different than that, what you just did. I can't do either, and so...
You can't roll your R's?
No.
Interesting.
Keep in mind that up until I hit puberty, I had a speech defect. I couldn't say the letter R at all. So the fact that I can do that now, at least the English letter R, is a wonderful thing, and I'm happy with that. At least I don't sound like Elmer Fudd anymore like I did until I was 12 or 13 whenever puberty hit.
That sucks.
Yeah, it did suck. It did develop my vocabulary because I got very adept at using words that didn't have R's in them. I purposely would try to figure out some way to get my point across without having to.
And that's interesting because in third grade, kids are supposed to have all of their sounds. And
I actually had speech therapy.
that's not where I'm going.
Oh, sorry.
By third grade, kids are supposed to have all their sounds. And I have a very acute ear for sounds, that letters are coming out the right way. So I can hear very slight speech problems, and it bothers me. But my kids that don't have their R's, they just keep talking. They don't seem to care. And it's interesting that maybe it's because you were a little older when it went away.
It always bothered me that I couldn't do it. I kept trying to do it. I couldn't do it. I just could not make the noise. I knew I wasn't making the noise. I knew the noise I wanted to make, but somehow I couldn't make it happen.
Interesting.
And the fact that my name begins with an R was a frustration. And I would, people would ask me, "What's your name?" I'd give it to them, and they go, "What?" It was bad all the way around. And so, like I say, I got very adept at finding alternative words for whatever it is I wanted to say, because I just got tired of and not being understood. So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I've never had a student that purposely replaces words
with other words.
Yeah, to avoid their speech issue.
No,
they just struggle through.
No, I tried to avoid my speech issue.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I was very quiet, but if I did have to talk, I would try to find, which is part of probably why I was quiet.
I didn't have any speech problems, and I was born chatting.
Yeah. Okay, well.
I'll die talking too.
Yeah. Anyway, we've gone off on enough bunny trails.
Okay.
Go ahead and give the little ad, and then we'll close out.
Okay, so A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry is brought to you by Quartz Hill School of Theology, which is brought to you by Quartz Hill Community Church. We are located in the Antelope Valley, in Quartz Hill specifically, at the corner of 51st Street West and Avenue K. If you are local and you would like to take some Bible or theology classes, we do teach them in person. You can also take them online. And if you want credit for them, you just pay a nominal fee for the credit. If you are looking for a church to worship at, we have morning worship at 11 a.m. here at the church. We do live stream our services, so if you just want to test drive us, or if you live in another area and you want to check us out, you can also, in the Quartz Hill Community Church Facebook page, you can find our services live streamed starting at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays. And then, of course, about the Mirror Darkly webcast. That happens about 4 p.m. on Saturdays. Today it was definitely about, because we were late. I do want to say that we are aware that there is a skipping issue with the live stream services. We've pinpointed it down. We think it's the camera, but it seems to be a new problem.
We use a different camera for A Mirror Darkly than what we do for services.
But we weren't having the problem before, so we've got to figure out what the issue is and see about. It's probably some update we need or something. And maybe once you update this, maybe
yeah,
that'll fix it.
the software that we use for doing the webcasts, it has a little thing here that says update available, so maybe that'll take care of it.
Yeah, that might fix it. So anyway, it does make us sound like we're singing super fast through the songs. We're not. We're singing at normal speed. It does make his sermons skip a little bit.
That may be a
But
good
you
thing.
can, especially the last couple weeks, he's doing a new type of sermon, and so he's struggling with how much to do and all that, and just being like, okay, well, I guess I'm done. You Joe Biden'd it and said, I guess I'm out of time.
Yeah.
So anyway, but check us out if you, if you already have a church you're worshiping at, you can join us on live stream if you want. It's at a different time, but we're not looking to take people from other churches. We just want to reach out to people that don't have a church, where they want to make some connections with people and make some connections with God. So anyway, have a good week, and we'll see you about 4:00 next Saturday. Oh, what's the topic?
I do not recall. I did not bother to look. Do you have?
I
go
don't know.
to the webpage. It's at the top.
Okay, the webpage.
Or not the webpage, the
Well,
Facebook
but I'm
page.
I'm in the live thing,
Okay,
so I'm stuck.
you're
in
stuck.
That. Yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, if you go to the Facebook page for Mirror Darkly, if you haven't joined, then you should do so. And pinned at the top is what the upcoming topics will be.
Okay.
So you can look at that and find out. So
All right.
until next
Have a good week.
time, yeah, see you later. Let's see, where's my mouth? There.